On a freezing night, a broken widow opened her door to a stranger. But she had no idea she was inviting a vampire king into her life. What started as a simple act of kindness soon turned into a story of power, danger, and a love that even darkness could not destroy. This is not just a story about vampires. It's a story about how one kind heart changed a king forever. If you love emotional, powerful stories like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable stories. Asterisk on the coldest night of the year, a kind widow opened her door to a stranger with haunted eyes, never knowing she had just invited a vampire king into her broken world. Emily Carter burned the final warning notice in her small kitchen stove just as the evening sky turned dark and heavy with clouds, the paper curling into black ash while her hands stayed steady, even though her heart felt like it was slowly breaking inside her chest. Because she had learned long ago that crying would not feed her child or protect her home. And ever since her husband had died 2 years ago in a tragic accident, she had carried the weight of the world alone, working long hours, facing harsh words from neighbors who saw her as weak, and enduring the quiet loneliness that followed her like a shadow she could never escape. That same afternoon, the landlord had come with 2 men, his voice cold and cruel as he told her she had only 30 days left before they would take the house, mocking her inability to pay and laughing when she tried to plead for more time. And even as she stood there humiliated, she had still thanked him politely, because kindness was the only thing she refused to lose, even when everything else was being taken away from her. After they left, she closed the door slowly, leaned her forehead against the wood, and allowed herself exactly 1 minute to feel the fear before pushing it deep inside and returning to prepare a simple meal for her child. Because no matter how hard life became, she would not let her pain steal her gentleness. The wind outside grew stronger as night fell, turning into a violent storm that rattled the windows and filled the air with an eerie silence between each gust. And Emily had just put her child to sleep when she heard it, 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door, not rushed or desperate, but calm and controlled, sending a strange chill down her spine, as if something unknown stood waiting beyond the wood. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the handle, her mind warning her to be careful. But her heart, as always, chose compassion over fear. And when she finally opened the door, she saw a man standing in the storm, tall and still, his dark coat dusted with snow, his pale face illuminated by the faint light from inside her home, and his eyes deep, crimson, and filled with a sadness that felt far older than any human life locked onto hers in a way that made time seem to slow. He did not look like a beggar or a traveler, yet he spoke softly, his voice low and controlled, as he asked only for a place to rest away from the storm, offering nothing more than quiet gratitude in return. Emily studied him carefully, noticing how untouched his hands looked, how his presence carried something powerful and unnatural. Yet she also saw something else, hidden beneath it all, a quiet exhaustion, a loneliness that mirrored her own, and without asking another question, she stepped aside and allowed him in, because she understood what it meant to have nowhere to go. As he entered, the air in the room shifted, a strange stillness settling around him. But he remained calm, respectful, and distant, introducing himself only as Kale, offering no further details about who he was or where he came from. She gave him warm soup and a place near the fire, and though he barely touched the food, he thanked her with a sincerity that felt rare and real, watching her with a quiet intensity, as if trying to understand something he had not seen in a very long time. Outside, the storm grew stronger, but inside that small house, something far more powerful had already begun, a silent connection between a broken widow and a hidden king. A meeting that neither of them yet understood, but one that would soon change both of their lives forever. He came as a silent traveler, but every small kindness Emily showed him began cracking the darkness around a heart that had not felt warmth in centuries. The storm did not stop the next morning, and the world outside Emily Carter's small home disappeared under thick snow, cutting her off from the town and the people who had already turned their backs on her. But inside, something unfamiliar lingered in the air, a quiet presence that she could not ignore, because the stranger Cale had not left, and though he spoke little, his existence filled the space with a strange sense of calm and tension at the same time. Emily woke early, as she always did, moving silently so she would not disturb her child, preparing what little food she had left, carefully dividing it as she always did to make sure it lasted. Yet without hesitation, she placed a portion aside for Cale, because no matter how little she had, she refused to let someone else go hungry under her roof. When she handed it to him, he looked at the bowl for a moment before looking at her, as if confused by the simple act of kindness, and though he accepted it, he barely ate, his eyes instead studying her with a quiet intensity that made her feel both seen and unsettled. Throughout the day, Cale worked without being asked, stepping outside into the storm as if the freezing wind did not affect him, chopping wood with unnatural strength and speed, carrying heavy logs as though they weighed nothing, and repairing broken parts of the house that Emily had not been able to fix for months. And when she tried to thank him, he simply nodded, as if gratitude was something unfamiliar to him. Yet something in his expression softened each time she spoke to him gently. Emily could not ignore the strange details anymore, the way his skin remained cold even near the fire, the way he never seemed tired, the way he avoided sunlight even when it briefly broke through the clouds, but instead of fear. She felt curiosity, and more than that, she felt a strange sense of trust that she could not explain that later that evening. Her child laughed for the first time in days as Cale listened quietly, his expression unreadable, but his attention fully present. And Emily noticed something change in him, something small but real, as if that sound had reached a place inside him that had been silent for far too long. She found herself watching him more closely, noticing the way he observed everything, the way his eyes carried a weight of years that no ordinary man could possess. And though her instincts told her that he was not what he claimed to be, her heart reminded her that he had done nothing but help her since the moment he arrived as night fell again. The storm began to weaken, but the silence inside the house grew heavier, filled with unspoken questions, and Emily finally gathered the courage to ask him why he was really there, her voice calm but firm as she met his gaze without fear. Cale paused for a long moment, his eyes darkening slightly, and then he spoke in a low voice that carried both truth and mystery, telling her that he had not come by accident, that something had led him to her door that night, though he did not yet understand what it was. His answer sent a quiet shiver through her, because deep down she felt the same unexplainable pull, as if their meeting had been written long before either of them realized it. That night, as Emily lay awake listening to the fading storm, she realized that the stranger she had welcomed into her home was not just a traveler seeking shelter, but something far more dangerous and far more important. And though she did not yet know his true nature, she could feel it growing stronger with every passing moment, whatever Cale truly was. He had not entered her life by chance, and soon the truth would no longer remain hidden. When cruel people tried to humiliate the widow again, the mysterious stranger stepped forward, and for the first time, the town saw a shadow of the monster their fear had created. The storm finally cleared by the next morning, leaving behind a frozen silence that made everything feel sharper, colder, and more real. And Emily Carter knew that, with the storm gone, The world and its cruelty would return to her doorstep, because peace in her life had never lasted long, and as she stepped outside to gather wood, she saw them approaching from the distance, the landlord and his men, their figures cutting through the snow with the same arrogance and cruelty she had faced before, and her heart tightened not out of fear for herself, but out of worry for her child and the fragile stability she had managed to hold together. Cale stood quietly near the edge of the house, his presence almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore, his crimson eyes watching everything with a calm that felt unnatural, as if he had seen far worse than anything this small town could offer. And when Emily noticed him, she gave a small, reassuring nod, silently asking him not to interfere, because she had learned to endure humiliation rather than risk making things worse. The landlord arrived with a mocking smile, his voice loud and sharp as he reminded Emily of her debt, speaking in a way that was meant to humiliate her, to break her spirit in front of anyone who might be watching. And when she tried to respond calmly, he laughed, stepping closer, his tone turning cruel as he suggested she had nothing left to offer except her dignity. And the men behind him joined in, their laughter echoing in the cold air, turning the moment into something deeply painful and unfair. Emily stood still, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady, refusing to let them see her break, because she had promised herself that no matter how harsh the world became, she would not lose her self-respect, even if she had already lost everything else. Cale watched in silence at first, his expression unreadable, but something dark began to shift in his eyes, a quiet anger rising beneath the surface, something ancient and dangerous that did not belong in this world. And as the landlord reached out, grabbing Emily's arm with force, something changed completely. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, colder, as Cale stepped forward, his movement so fast and controlled that it felt unreal. And in the next moment, he was standing between them, his presence overwhelming, his gaze locked onto the man with a calm that was far more terrifying than anger. He said nothing at first, but the silence carried a weight that made the laughter stop instantly. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and filled with authority, telling the man to let her go. The landlord hesitated, trying to mask his fear with arrogance. But something in Cale's eyes broke through that false confidence, and slowly, almost unwillingly, he released Emily's arm, stepping back as if his instincts were warning him of something he could not understand. The men behind him shifted uncomfortably, their earlier cruelty replaced with unease, because whatever stood before them was not just a man, and though they could not explain it, they could feel it. Cale did not raise his voice, did not threaten, yet his presence alone forced them to retreat, their pride wounded, but their fear stronger. And as they left, casting uncertain glances behind them, the silence returned once again. Emily stood there, her heart racing, her mind struggling to understand what she had just witnessed, because the stranger she had allowed into her home had just revealed a glimpse of something powerful, something unnatural. And when she looked at him, truly looked this time, she realized that whatever Cale was hiding, it was far beyond anything she had imagined, and deep inside, a new truth began to form. He had not just come to protect her. He had come because somehow, in a way she did not yet understand, she mattered to him. As danger closed in, Emily discovered the stranger's terrifying secret. But instead of running from the vampire king, she saw the pain hiding behind his immortal power. The silence after the landlord's departure did not bring peace. It brought questions, heavy and unavoidable, pressing against Emily Carter's mind as she stood in the cold air, her arm still aching where it had been grabbed, but her attention fixed entirely on Cale, because what she had just witnessed could no longer be ignored. And though fear should have taken hold of her, it did not. Instead, There was something else, an unsettling calm mixed with a growing need to understand who, or what, stood before her. Cale did not speak at first, his gaze drifting away as if he had already said too much. As if revealing even that small glimpse of his power had broken a rule he had followed for centuries. And when Emily finally found her voice, she did not accuse him, did not step back. She simply asked the truth in the gentlest way possible. Her eyes steady as she looked at him and said quietly that he was not just a traveler. For a long moment, Cale remained still, the wind moving softly around them, as if even nature itself was waiting for his answer. And then he turned back toward her, his expression no longer guarded but heavy, tired in a way that spoke of years far beyond human understanding. And when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet truth that could not be hidden anymore, telling her that he was something the world feared, something it had hunted, whispered about, and turned into legend. And though he did not say the word immediately, Emily felt it before she heard it, the realization settling deep within her as he finally admitted that he was not human, that he was a vampire, and not just any vampire, but a king among them, a ruler of a hidden world that existed alongside hers. Unseen but powerful, the truth hung between them, heavy and undeniable, yet Emily did not run, did not scream, because as she looked at him, she saw more than the title, more than the danger. She saw the same loneliness she carried within herself, the same quiet suffering that no one else had ever noticed, and instead of fear, her voice softened as she asked him why someone like him would come to a place like this, why a king would stand in the snow, asking for shelter like a man with nothing. Cale's eyes darkened slightly, not with anger, but with something far more fragile, something he rarely allowed himself to feel. And he admitted that he had not come for power or purpose, that he had come because he had grown tired of eternity, tired of ruling without meaning, tired of watching the world change while he remained the same. And for the first time in centuries, he had followed something he did not understand a pull, a feeling that had led him directly to her door. Emily listened without judgment, her heart aching in a way she could not explain, because she understood what it meant to feel lost, to continue living without knowing why. And though his world was far darker than hers, the pain was the same, and slowly, without realizing it, she took a step closer instead of away, her voice calm as she told him that whatever he was, whatever power he carried, it did not change what she had seen in him since the moment he arrived, a man who chose to help, who chose to protect, and who, despite everything, had not harmed her. That moment changed something between them, something quiet but powerful, because for the first time in his long existence, Cale was not seen as a monster, not feared or obeyed, but understood. And as he stood there looking at Emily, he realized that her kindness was not weakness. It was something far stronger than anything he had ever known. And though danger was beginning to grow around them, neither of them knew yet that the truth she had accepted so calmly would soon place her directly in the path of a world far more dangerous than the one she had been struggling to survive. A battle between fear and love began when Emily's kindness touched the cursed soul of a king, forcing him to choose between his dark throne and a woman who restored his humanity. The days that followed were no longer quiet or simple, because once the truth had been revealed, the world around Emily Carter began to shift in ways she could not fully understand. And Cale knew before she did that danger was coming, not from the cruel men in the town, but from something far older and far more ruthless, his own kind. Because a vampire king did not disappear without consequence, and the moment he had stepped away from his throne, others had begun searching for him, sensing the imbalance his absence created in their hidden world. Emily noticed the change in him immediately, the way his calm presence became sharper, more alert, as if he was listening to something she could not hear. And though he tried to hide it, she saw the tension in his movements, the silent warning in his eyes whenever he looked toward the forest beyond her home. One evening, as the sky darkened into a deep crimson sunset, Cale stood outside alone, his gaze fixed on the horizon, and Emily stepped beside him quietly, asking him what he was afraid of, because she could feel it now, the same way she had once felt the storm before it arrived. And Cale did not lie to her this time, telling her that others like him were coming, that they would not understand his choices, that they would see her not as a person, but as a weakness, something to be removed. And his voice carried a rare urgency as he told her she needed to leave, to go somewhere far away where his world could not reach her. But Emily did not step back, did not agree, because for the first time in her life, she felt something stronger than fear, something rooted in the same kindness that had defined her entire existence. And she told him calmly that she was tired of running from everything, tired of losing people, tired of being treated as if her life did not matter. And if danger was coming, then she would face it, not alone, but with him, because he had stood for her when no one else had. And she would not abandon him now, simply because the truth was frightening. Before Cale could respond, the air around them shifted, growing unnaturally cold, and from the darkness beyond the trees, figures began to emerge, moving with silent precision, their eyes glowing faintly as they stepped into the open, their presence heavy with power and judgment. And Emily felt her heart race as she realized that these were not humans, not even close, but something far beyond anything she had ever imagined. They spoke to Cale not with respect, but with accusation, questioning his absence, his choices. And when their eyes fell on Emily, their expressions hardened, seeing her exactly as Cale had feared, as a weakness that should not exist. Cale stepped forward instantly, placing himself between them and Emily, his presence changing completely. No longer the quiet traveler, but the king he truly was, his voice cold and commanding as he warned them to leave, making it clear that she was under his protection. And for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath as power met power, tension building into something that felt ready to break. Emily stood behind him, her fear real, but her resolve stronger, because she understood now that this was more than survival. This was a choice between fear and courage, between hiding and standing firm. And as she looked at Cale, she realized that the man who had once been alone in his darkness was now fighting not just for himself, but for her. In that moment, everything changed, because this was no longer a quiet meeting between two broken souls. It had become a battle between two worlds, and the outcome would decide not only their future, but whether kindness could truly survive in a world ruled by fear and power. In the end, the widow everyone ignored became the light of a dark kingdom, proving that true love is not born from power, but from kindness, sacrifice, and trust. The night felt heavier than any storm Emily Carter had ever faced, the air thick with tension as the ancient vampires stood before Cale, their glowing eyes filled with judgment and cold authority, waiting for their king to choose between his throne and the fragile humans standing behind him. And for the first time in centuries, Cale did not remain silent or distant, because something within him had changed in a way even he could not fully explain, something awakened not by power or fear, but by the quiet strength of a woman who had nothing yet, still chose kindness over bitterness. Emily could feel the danger pressing in from all sides, her heart beating fast, yet she did not hide behind him. Instead, she stepped forward slightly, her voice trembling but steady enough to be heard as she spoke not with defiance, but with truth, telling them that she was not his weakness, that she had not asked for his protection, but she would not accept being treated as something disposable. Simply because she was human. The vampires reacted instantly, some amused, Others angered, because no human had ever spoken in their presence like that. And one of them moved forward, his intent clear as he prepared to strike, seeing her as nothing more than an obstacle to remove. But before he could take another step, Cale's presence erupted into something far more powerful than before, his eyes burning with a deep crimson glow, his voice no longer calm, but commanding as he declared that anyone who dared harm her would answer to him, not as a wandering stranger, but as their king. And the force of his authority shook the ground beneath them, reminding them of exactly who stood before them. But this moment was not only about power, it was about choice, and as the silence stretched, something unexpected happened, because instead of attacking, the vampires hesitated, sensing something different in their king, something they had not seen in him for centuries. And one of the elders spoke, questioning him not with anger, but with curiosity, asking why a ruler who had everything would risk it all for a human life. Cale's answer came without hesitation, his voice steady, carrying a truth that echoed far beyond the moment, as he said that power without purpose was emptiness, that eternity without connection was nothing but endless darkness, and that this human, this woman they saw as weak, had shown him something none of them ever had: the meaning of compassion, of loyalty, of choosing to care, even when the world gives you every reason not to doubt. Emily stood beside him, her fears slowly replaced by something stronger, something warm and unshakable, because she realized that this was not just his battle anymore. It was theirs, and without thinking, she reached for his hand, a small, simple gesture that carried more strength than any power in that moment. And Cale did not pull away, because for the first time in his long existence, he allowed himself to hold on to something real. The silence that followed was no longer threatening. It was thoughtful, and slowly the tension began to fade as the vampires stepped back, not defeated, but changed, because even in their dark world, something about this moment could not be ignored. And without another word, they turned and disappeared into the night, leaving behind a quiet that felt different from before, not empty, but full of possibility. As dawn approached, Emily stood outside her home, the first light of morning touching the snow, and beside her stood Cale, no longer just a king or a stranger, but someone who had chosen a new path, not defined by power, but by purpose. And though the future remained uncertain, one truth had become clear: kindness had done what strength never could. It had transformed a king, protected a broken life, and built a bond that neither darkness nor time could destroy.